It's a pleasure to welcome you all once again to this course on inferential discrete mathematics. The last class we had an introduction to the cosets of a subgroup, both left cosets and right cosets. We had a look at a set of examples on how cosets can be generated from a subgroup. We followed it with an introduction to what we called as normal subgroups, and we introduced a theorem which said that if the group is abelian, then any subgroup of the group will also be automatically normal. And we also gave you an example where the group was non-abelian, but still the corresponding subgroup turned out to be a normal subgroup. We'll follow this up today with an introduction to what is called as a symmetric group. Symmetric group, once again, is an example for a non-abelian group out of which we can identify one normal subgroup which has the characteristics of a normal subgroup. We can identify that and we'll discuss that today. Before that, we'll do a couple of problems just to have a revision of the topics that we have discussed so far. The first problem that we'll discuss is about the inverse of an element in a group. We have had a look at inverses of elements, but all of them have been specific to a particular group, specific to a particular element, specific to a particular operation. This has been discussed through examples, but today we'll discuss one problem which analyzes the inverse of the result of the binary operation on two elements A and B. So let A and B be any two elements. We will find out a method to find the inverse of the result of the operation star on both A and B. So this is not an example. We are not restricting ourselves to a particular group or a particular binary operation. What we are doing is general. Whatever we obtain now can be generalized and applied for any group involving any binary operation. Let's get into the problem. Let A and B denote two elements of a group G star. Now we are supposed to derive a formula for the inverse of A star B. Now remember, since G star is a group, every element is supposed to have an inverse element within the group. You will definitely have an inverse element within the group. So A will have its own inverse in A dash. Let's call the inverse of A as A dash, and B will have its own inverse in B dash. Let's denote the inverse as B dash. Now we are interested in finding the inverse of an element which is a result of the operation star on both A and B. So this way we are going to devise a formula which can be applied for any group and any operation. I'll first solve the problem as it is in the general case, and we'll also have a look at a couple of examples to help you get familiar with the idea. So we'll start with the definition of an inverse. What do we mean when we say an element is an inverse of another element? We say that 2 is the inverse of minus 2 and vice versa. Minus 2 is the inverse of plus 2 because you operate these two and you get the additive identity 0. Similarly, with multiplication, we say 7 is the inverse of 1 upon 7 and vice versa. 1 upon 7 is the inverse of 7 because when you multiply both, you get the multiplicative identity as in 1. Similarly, when we have a group G star, remember we are not dealing with particular groups and particular operations, we are dealing with a general description of a group. If we are dealing with a general description, let's fix the identity element as E. So we'll start with this general statement that E is the identity element of the given group that we are considering. We are not starting with examples. Remember, giving examples is not equivalent to proving it. Therefore, we will do it in the general case. So the first statement will be, let E denote let E denote the identity of the group G star, identity element of G star. Now, since we have already fixed A dash and B dash as the inverse elements of A and B respectively, we know that A star A dash must give us E. Similarly, B star B dash must give us E again, because that follows from the definition of the inverse element and the definition of the property behind the identity element. Therefore, these two must be true. What are we supposed to find? We are supposed to find the inverse of an element A star B. We don't know what A is, we don't know what B is, we don't know what star is, but still we are trying to find out the inverse of the element A star. Let's call that element as X. We are looking for the answer of X. What can X be? X is some element which, when multiplied with this A star B, the result of A star B is going to return the identity element E. So X, when operated on the result of A star B, is going to give us the identity element E. We don't know what X is, and that's what we are trying to find out. We are trying to find out a formula for X. What can X be? Finding that is pretty easy. We will just use the property of the inverse elements to help us get the answer. Now, since we know this is possible, what I'll do is I'll pre-multiply, or I'll operate A inverse on both sides from the left. So A inverse star A star B star X is going to give me A inverse star E. Now I'm operating it on both sides. This is possible because A inverse is definitely part of the set. A inverse is not some element that is outside the set. I know A inverse is part of the set, or A dash is part of the set, because I know A dash is part of the set because the set G along with the operation star has been identified as a group. So I definitely have an element called A dash related with the element A. I definitely have this element part of the set. So I have A dash operated on both sides. Now, by using the associative property, what I can do is I can shuffle the brackets so that I have A inverse A dash and A operated first, and the result being operated with B. Because that's what the associative property stated. And then I have X here. On the right I have only A dash and E. Now, by the definition of the identity element and how it is connected with the inverse element, this result is going to give me E. E star B star X is going to give me A dash star E. By the property of the identity element, any element on E should give me that element back. So I get back A dash. So E and B will once again give me B back. So B star X is A dash. This gives us the next result, where B star X is A dash. Now we just need to introduce one more element to lose this term on the left. Then we'll have only X remaining on the left hand side of the equation, and therefore we'll have the answer for the inverse element we are looking for. So what we'll do is we'll operate both sides by the the inverse element of B. So B dash star B star X is B dash star A dash. This is once again permitted because I know that the inverse element of B is existing and is part of the group that I am considering. By the property again, these two elements together, B dash and B, is supposed to return the element E that goes by the definition of the identity element and the inverse element. So E star X is going to give me B dash star A dash. Now, because of the special property behind the identity element, E star X will always give me X back. So X is B dash star A dash, and that's the answer we are looking for. So the inverse of the element A star B is the element B dash star A dash. Kindly observe the way the order has been reversed. Here A was operating on the B from the left, here B dash is operating on the A from the left. So that is how the inverse of the element A star B is being identified. Now we can discuss a couple of examples which will help us understand the concept. Let's pick a very simple group Z and plus, the set of all integers under addition. Let A denote 5 and B denote 7. This means that the inverse of A is A dash, which is minus 5. The inverse of B is B dash, which is minus 7. Now we are interested in finding the inverse of A star B, that is the inverse of 5 plus 7, which is 12. What can be the inverse of 12? We know that the inverse of 12 is minus 12, but let's find that using the formula we just derived. We just derived the formula stating that the inverse of 5 plus 7 is the inverse of 7 plus the inverse of 5. That's what we derived in the previous slide. The inverse of 7 we know to be minus 7, and the inverse of 5 we know to be minus 5. So minus 7 and minus 5 when added are going to give us minus 12. So that's the way we find out the inverse of the result of the binary operation operating on two elements A and B. We can take one more example to understand the property even better. Let's take the group involving the reminders when you divide integers by 8, and let's consider the operation as the addition modulo 8. We have seen a lot of examples. We have dealt with this group numerous times in the previous lectures, so this should not be difficult for you. Let's pick two random numbers. Let A denote 5 and B denote 7. 5 and 7 are definitely part of the group because they can be reminders when some number is divided by 8. So 5 and 7 are what we have. We also know what the inverses are. The inverse of 5 happens to be 3 because 5 plus 3 is 8, and 8 leaves a remainder of 0 when divided by 8. And similarly 7, the inverse of 7 is 1 because 7 and 1 give us 8 again, 8 which reduces to 0. Therefore we have already defined the inverse of the two elements that we are considering. Now let's consider what happens if A and B are operated on using the operation here. So what happens to 5 and 7, the sum of 5 and 7 under addition modulo 8. 5 and 7 is supposed to give me 12, but 12 is greater than 8, which means I'll divide 12 by 8 and return the remainder. So that's going to be equivalent to 4 because 4 is the remainder when 12 is divided by 8. So 5 and 7 is actually giving me 4. So what is the inverse of 5 and 7? The inverse of 5 and 7 is the inverse of 4, and in this group 4 is its own inverse. So the answer we are looking for is 4. But let's try and find the answer using the formula we derived. We derived the formula saying that the inverse of A star B, the inverse of A star B is B dash star A dash. The inverse of B operating on the inverse of A from the left. B dash we know to be 1, A dash we know to be 3, we know star to be plus 8. Now 1 and 3 when added are going to give us 4, and since 4 is less than 8, you retain the 4 as it is. So we have derived the inverse of 5 and 7 operated together as 4, that matches with the example that we considered. So this can be noted as a formula for the inverse of any two elements operating using a binary operation star. Now what is special with the answer that we have derived is that it is general. You can apply the answer to any group involving any binary operation star. You can do it for any. This is a general formula. It is not built with the help of an example. We have illustrated the formula to be right using examples, but the answer was built from the scratch. The answer was built rigorously. The answer did not use any examples to justify. We have developed it from a general perspective, and therefore you can note this down as a formula. We will have a look at one more problem to help you recall the idea behind subgroups. The question asks us to prove or disprove whether the intersection of two subgroups is always a subgroup. Now I'll explain the question using an example, and then we'll go into the problem as a proof. I'm not proving it using an example, I'm going to explain it using an example. Let's take one example with the set of all integers under addition. It has many subgroups, out of which let's consider two subgroups, one involving all even numbers and one involving all multiples of 5. We showed in a previous class that both these are subgroups. This is also a subgroup of Z plus. This is also a subgroup of Z plus. So what about the intersection of these two subgroups? Can we also show that the intersection will be a subgroup? If it is a subgroup, we'll try and prove it. If it is not subgroup, we'll try to reason out why it is not being observed like that. Okay. Now what is this set going to be? The set of all even numbers. The set of all even numbers is pretty easy to write down. The set of all even numbers is all even numbers which are either negative, positive or 0. All of them get counted. Minus 8, minus 6, minus 4, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, so on and so forth. And what about this set of all multiples of 5? Once again, we have the rights to include the integer 0. So we have this. Now we have already seen that these two subsets are actually subgroups. They are closed. They have the inverse for every element, and the two condition test can be applied to claim that this subset is actually a subgroup. These two are subgroups. There is no worry about that. Now we are concerned about the intersection. What elements are common to both these subsets? That's what you mean by an intersection, don't you? An intersection is the collection of all elements that are common to both sets considered. So when I have, if you can recall the Venn diagram, when I have A and B, A intersection B is the one in the middle, the region that is common to both, the region that is not exclusive to one of the two sets, the region that is common to both. Now what can be some element that is common to one set, the set of all even numbers, and another set, the set of all multiples of 5? What can be such element? Clearly 5 can't be common to both. 0 is common, that's what you can say. If I call this H1 and I call this H2, let's try and list the elements in H1 and H2, the common elements. 0 is definitely part. 0 is going to be part of H1 because 0 is an even number, and 0 is also part of H2 because 0 can be expressed as a multiple of 5. So 0 is definitely common. Are there any other elements that are common? 2 cannot be common to both because 2 is not a multiple of 5, and so is minus 4. Minus 4 is also eliminated. Minus 2 is also eliminated. Minus 4 is eliminated. Minus 6 is eliminated. Minus 8 cannot be common, but minus 10 can be common. Minus 10 actually is part of both subsets. Minus 10 is an even number, that is pretty easy to verify, and minus 10 is also a multiple of 5 which can also be verified. So minus 10 is going to be part. Now if minus 10 is going to be part, then so will plus 10, because minus 10 is a multiple of 5, a multiple of 2. The same thing can be extended to minus 5 is minus 10 is also a multiple of, plus 10 is also a multiple of 5, plus 10 is also a multiple of 2. Are there any elements that are common? In fact, yes. Minus 20 is common to both, and plus 20 is also common to both. If you try and extend this set of intersection, you will find that minus 20, minus 30, minus 40, plus 20, plus 30, plus 40, etc., so on and so forth, are actually common to both the subgroups that we are considering. Now the question before us is that, is this actually a subgroup in itself? There are common elements, all right. Now you have bought the idea that there are common elements. The intersection is not a null set, but do you have enough evidence to show that the intersection is also a subgroup? What do we need to find out for this? We'll have to see whether this intersection passes the two condition test. Is this set closed? It is absolutely closed, because you take any two numbers from this set, you add them, the result is going to be a multiple of 10, and as long as it is a multiple of 10, it is going to be part of the set. Therefore it is closed. Now do we have an inverse for every element considered? That is also right, because the inverse element for 20 is minus 20, 30 is minus 30, minus 50 is plus 50. Therefore this is closed. This has an inverse element for every element. Therefore it happens so that this is also a subgroup. So we have actually considered one subgroup, set of all even numbers, and another subgroup, set of all multiples of 5. We have written down what the intersection looks like, and to our surprise we see that the intersection is a subgroup. But that's not the question that we are trying to solve. We are not specific to a group, we are not specific to an operation, we are trying to generalize. Just like the previous problem, can we generalize the given statement? Will the intersection of two subgroups be always a subgroup? That's what we are trying to find out. And I gave this example so that you will be familiar with the idea that I am considering, but this is not the proof. So I'm just going to the next slide, where I'll show that this is true for any group in general. So we will not focus on a single group, we will not focus on a single operation, we will not focus on a set of subgroups. We will take the general case and show that this is right. So how do we start? Let G star be any group, G star be any group, and let H1 and H2 be two subgroups of G star. Now we are interested in determining the intersection. What happens to the intersection? Keep in mind that we don't know what the group is, we don't know what the star is, we don't know what the H1 and H2 are, but we are still setting out to prove that this is true. Okay. Now what do we need for a subset? First of all, whenever we define the subgroup, we know that the subset should be non-empty. There is no use considering an empty set and showing that it is a subgroup or it is not a subgroup. That doesn't count. We'll have to start with a non-empty set. Now we'll have to first show that H1 intersection H2 is actually non-empty. How do you show that something is non-empty? You will have to establish the fact that it has at least one element. If there is one element, that's enough. So even if there is one element, we can show that this set of all common elements is actually non-empty. But how do we know for sure without any description of the group or the subgroup or the binary operation? Showing that it is non-empty may sound like a very difficult task, but it is not so, because you know that the identity element is always part of any subgroup. The identity element belongs to both H1 and H2. Therefore, the identity element belongs to the set of all common elements also. Look at all the subgroups we have considered so far. The identity element will belong to that subgroup, because when we introduced the notion of a subgroup, we told you that a subgroup is a subset which is a group in itself. So it is actually a group which means it has to tick off all 4 conditions. We have reduced those 4 conditions to 2 or 1 to reduce our task, but still the 4 conditions will hold for any subgroup, and one of those 4 conditions is that the identity element should be part of the set, and therefore this will always be part, and hence H1 intersection H2 is non-empty. It's not an empty set, it has at least one element. Maybe it will have more, but it will always have one element. Now the moment you have shown that it is non-empty, we can proceed and look at either the 2 condition test or 1 condition test to show that this set is also a subgroup. We'll go for the 2 condition test. The 2 condition test wants us to verify if the closure property is met, or the condition behind the closure property is met for a given non-empty subset. Now what is the closure property? For any 2 elements A and B, A star B should also be part of the subset. So for that, let's consider 2 elements. Let A comma B belong to the intersection. Let A comma B belong to the intersection. Now if we somehow prove that A star B also belongs to the intersection, then we have actually showed that the closure property is observed, or the condition behind the closure property has been met. So that's what we'll have to check. Now let A comma B belong to the intersection. What do we mean by this? If A comma B belongs to the intersection, then A belongs to both H1 and H2. Similarly, B also belongs to both H1 and H2. That's what it means. When you say A and B are common, A and B are in both. Now let's recall the property behind a subgroup. If a subset is a subgroup, it is actually closed. Now since A comma B belong to H1, and because H1 is a subgroup, A star B also belongs to H1. Because it is a subgroup, it has to be closed. Similarly, A comma B belong to H2, therefore A star B also belongs to H2. Because if it doesn't, then H2 is not a subgroup. The question clearly states that we are considering 2 non-empty subgroups H1 and H2 of the group G star. So A star B belongs to both H1 and H2, therefore you have the result that A star B is common. A star B belongs to the intersection. So we have actually verified the first of the 2 condition test. We have seen that the subset is actually closed. Once we have achieved this, the second part is not so difficult. The second part is about the inverse element. For any element A belonging to the intersection, we will have to show that the inverse also belongs to the intersection. So let's start with one such element. Let's assume A is an element belonging to both H1 and H2. A is some element belonging to both H1 and H2. Therefore A belongs to H1 and A belongs to H2. Now because H1 is a subgroup, A dash also belongs to H1, and because H2 is a subgroup, A dash also belongs to H2. So A dash belongs to both H1 and H2, which means A dash belongs to the intersection also. So for all A belonging to H1 and H2, we have actually verified the fact that A dash also belongs to H1 and H2. So we have verified the closure property, we have verified the inverse property, we have also shown that the identity is part of this intersection, and therefore we can conclude that whenever H1 and H2 are 2 subgroups of G star, the set of all common elements, the intersection of the 2 subgroups, will also be a subgroup. And that's how we have solved the problem. And the next one is similar but is more interesting. What about the union? What if we collect all elements from both subgroups and put them inside a box? Will this also be a subgroup? Let's discuss it with an example and then I'll prove it. Let's discuss this with an example, I'll then prove it. Let's consider Z plus. let's take two subgroups of Z plus, one being 2Z plus and one being 3Z plus. What if I were to, or even let's even take the same answer we considered the previous time. What if I take 5Z plus? Any two subgroups. This is only an example. I want you to be familiar with the idea. I'll show what is the answer in the next slide. Let's take 2Z plus and 5Z plus. Now we are trying to do the union of the two. Union of 2Z plus and 5Z plus. That's going to be a bag of all elements that are present in both the subgroups. So 2 and 5 is set of all multiples of both. So I'll have minus 5. I'll also have some elements before that. I'll have minus 2. I'll have 0. I'll have 2. I'll have 5. I'll have minus 10. It's common to both. I'll have 12. I'll have 4. I'll have 6. I'll have 8. All these numbers on the positive side. I'll have 15. I'll have 14, etc. In the negative side, I'll have minus 4. I'll have minus 6. I'll have minus 8. I'll have minus 10. I'll have minus 12. I'll have minus 14. I'll have minus 15, etc. The set is infinite. We're not going to list all elements, but this is a sample of some elements that will belong to the union. But is this set getting the extra status as a subgroup? Can you call this set as a subgroup? We'll see if it is possible. We'll verify one of the two conditions included in the two condition test. Does every element have an inverse? Of course. 2 and 2 are inverses, 5 and minus 5 are inverses, 10 and minus 10 are inverses, 12 and 12, 14 and 14, 15 and minus 15, 8 and 8, 6 and 6, 4 and 4. That's true. It happens so that every element has its own inverse. It also has the identity element contained with it. That's okay. But we are interested in the other condition. Is it closed? And there you will find that it is actually not closed. Because when I add 2 and 5, I'll get a 7, and 7 doesn't belong to the union of H1 and H2. Because 7 is not a multiple of 2, so it's absent from set of all 2 multiples. 7 is also not a multiple of 5, but hence it is absent from the set of all 5 multiples. But you say this is happening. You picked an element from the union, you picked another element from the union, you operated them both using the star, but the result is not present within the set. And hence this set is not closed, and hence H1 union H2 cannot be a subgroup, is not a subgroup. But that's only for this example. As I told you before, examples are not proof. But a counter example is enough to show that this is false. This statement is false. Because the statement made is a generalized statement, and you're trying to look at one example, it didn't meet the conditions required. Therefore, the entire generalized statement cannot be true. But is this always the case? Last problem we proved it for a general setup, and we showed that it is always the case. Whenever you pick two subgroups and you collect all elements common, the result happened to be a subgroup, the result will also be a subgroup. But here we saw one example which showed that the union is not a subgroup. But can you always generalize this? Let's have a look at one more example. Let's take the same group Z plus. Let's take the subgroup 2Z plus. This time let me pick up the set of all 4 multiples. Instead of 5 multiples, let's pick the 4 multiples. 2 multiples, all even numbers are put inside a box. So minus 6, minus 4, minus 2, 0, plus 2, plus 4, plus 6, so on and so forth. Let's pick set of all 4 multiples, minus 8, minus 4, 0, plus 4, plus 8, so on and so forth. Now what if we did the union? Now the union of these two, H1 and H2, is going to be all elements put in the bag again. That's minus 8, minus 6, minus 4, minus 2, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. Now, is this set closed? Actually, it is closed. When you add any two elements of this set, the result will be part of the set. Does every element have an inverse? It's still true. 2 and 2 are inverses, 4 and minus 4, 6 and minus 6, 8 and minus 8, all these are inverses of each other. So it still satisfies the two condition test. It is also non-empty. So where is the problem? The last slide we saw that the union of two subgroups is not a subgroup because it was not closed. This slide you see the union of two subgroups actually being a subgroup. So how do you understand this? The answer comes from identifying that H1 union H2 is the same. H1 union H2 is the same as H1. But it was not so in the previous case. The union was neither 2z plus nor 5z plus. It was not H1, it was not H2, it was totally something else. That is why it failed in the previous case. That is why it is still holding good in this case. The union of two subgroups is one of the two subgroups. And then you see that all of this happens. That is how we generalize. We state that H1 union H2 will be a subgroup. It may or may not be, but it will be a subgroup of G star if H1 is contained in H2 or H2 is contained in H1. Because if H1 is contained in H2, H1 union H2 is H2. It just says all elements of one is contained in the other, like here. All elements of this group, all elements of this subgroup are contained in the previous subgroup, because any multiple of 4 is also a multiple of 2. So when one of the two subgroups is properly contained in the other, then you will have the union to be a subgroup. Therefore H1 intersection H2 will imply the union is the larger set, or if you had H2 union H1, H2 contained in H1, then the union will be H1. But because we already assumed H1 and H2 to be subgroups, then union will also be a subgroup. So the union of two subgroups is not always, that's what we are generalizing here, is not always a subgroup. It is actually a subgroup only when the union is a subgroup, only when one subgroup is contained in the other. Either H1 is a proper subset of H2 or H2 is a proper subset of H1. Only when this is happening, you will observe that the union is actually a subgroup. Moving to the next problem, we have one simple question before you. Do the set of all integers, does the set of all integers which are multiples of 4, do they actually form a subgroup under Z plus? We discussed this some time back. I think it's in the previous slide. It's actually a subgroup. We saw that it is actually a subgroup, but let's prove it this time. Is it non-empty? Is the set of all multiples of 4 non-empty? Yes. You can clearly find out one number, at least one number that belongs to the set of all 4 multiples. 0. The identity element is part of the set. Is it closed? Of course it is closed. You add 2 multiples of 4, you are bound to get another multiple of 4. You add 12 and 20, you will get 32. You add 40 and 44, you will get 84. All of which are multiples of 4. So it is closed, yes. Does every element have an inverse? Inverse for every element. Does every element have an inverse? Turns out that is also right, because 4 and minus 4 are inverses of each other, 8 and minus 8 are inverses of each other. It ticks of all boxes required to be a subgroup, and hence 4z plus is actually a subgroup. We have already seen this, but we are proving this now. Now the next question is to list all cosets. Now we discussed this last class and I wanted to just refresh the idea behind a coset before we move to the next topic. List all distinct cosets of 4z plus, which is a subgroup of z plus. Now let's first list down what 4z plus is. 4z is actually the set of all multiples of 4. So minus 12, minus 8, minus 4, 0, no, 2 is not present, 4, 8, etc. is the set of all multiples of 4. Now how do you frame, how do you construct, how do you build the coset? You pick some element from z plus and add it to every element of 4z plus. Now what happens if I write 1 plus 4z? I am selecting that random element to be 1 and I am adding that with every element of 4z. So 1 minus 12 is minus 11, 1 minus 8 is minus 7, 1 and minus 4 is minus 3, 1 and 0 is 1 itself, 1 and 4 is 5, 1 and 8 is 9, so on and so forth. So this is one coset. Can it have one more distinct coset? It turns out it is, because when you add 2 to every element, you will get another coset. 2 and minus 12 is 10, 2 and minus 8 is 6, 2 and minus 4 is 2, 2 and 0 is 2, 2 and 4 is 6, 2 and 8 is 10 again. This is another coset. Now what about 3 plus 4z? 3 and 12 is 9, 3 and 8 is 5, 3 and 4 is 1, 3 and 0 is 3, 3 and 4 is 7, 3 and 8 is 11. Now for the last part, what about 4 plus 4z? 4 and minus 12 is minus 8, 4 and minus 4 is 0, 4 and 0 is 4, 4 and 4 is 8, 4 and 8 is 12, so on and so forth. Now what if I consider 5 plus 4z? Now 5 plus 4z will be same as this. You can check it out by yourselves. 5 and 12 is 7, 5 and 8 is 3, 5 and 4 is 1, 5 and 0 is 5, 5 and 4 is 9, 5 and 8 is 13. It will be the same. So will be 9 and 4z. So will be 13 and 4z. All of these will be same as 1 and 4z. So any subgroup that you will, any coset that you will build after these 4 will be a repetition of one of these 4. So we will say that there are only 4 distinct cosets, 4 distinct cosets of the subgroup 4z plus. So any coset that you build will either be this, this, this or this. There are only 4 distinct cosets. We have listed all of them down. That completes the problem. Now this time I have changed it a bit. Is 4z plus a subgroup of 2z plus is what I am asking. Once again we will check all of them. Is it non-empty? You know that it is non-empty. 4z plus is non-empty, because 0 is part of 4z plus. Next, is it closed? It is closed, because you add any 2 multiples of 4, you are bound to get another multiple of 4, so it is still closed. Does it have an inverse? Yes. 4 has an inverse in minus 4, 8 has an inverse in minus 8, minus 12 has an inverse in plus 12. So every element has an inverse, every element. If you pick a 4 multiple, its inverse is minus times that. So it's still satisfying all conditions for a subgroup. Therefore 4z plus is a subgroup of z plus. So we have established the fact that it is closed, it's non-empty, and also that every element has an inverse. So that completes this exercise. Now can you list down all distinct cosets? This time around I am giving G as not the set of all integers but the set of all even numbers. Now let's have 2z plus. 2z plus is going to have numbers like this. Minus 4, minus 2, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, so on and so forth. And you know what 4z plus is. minus 8, minus 4, 0, 4, 8, so on and so forth. Now how do you build a coset? We have seen this before. Pick some random element from the group, add it with every element of the subgroup. Let's pick the random number to be 2. So what happens to 2 plus 4z plus? Just adding 2 to every number, not doing anything else. Minus 8 becomes minus 6, minus 4 becomes minus 2, 2 becomes 0 becomes 2, 4 becomes 6, 8 4 becomes 6, 8 becomes 10, so on and so forth. Can we add any other element? Yes, we can still add 4. 4 can be added to every element in the subgroup, which means you will have minus 4, minus 2, 0, 2, 4 and so on, 4 and 8 and so on. Can you discuss any other coset here? What if I pick 4? 4 is already picked. What if I pick 8? This will be same as 8 plus 4z. What if I pick 2? It will be same as 2 plus 4z. So there are only 2 distinct cosets. Only 2 distinct cosets of the subgroup 4z plus. You can't add 3 or 1 or 5 because they are not part of the group. This is not the entire integers in one set. It is only the even integers that are collected in the set. So you can't add 1, 3, 5, 7 etc. So you have to add either 2 or 4. If you add 2, it's the first coset. If you add 4, it's the second coset. You won't get any other coset possible. You may add 16, you may add 22, you may add 84, all that, but they will be one of these two. So it has only 2 cosets. Next question is about 4z plus again, but this time we are checking for 4z plus becoming a subgroup of 3z plus. Now what is 3z plus? 3z plus is simple. Minus 6, minus 3, 0, 3, etc. so on and so forth. Is 4z plus a subgroup of 3z plus? 4z plus is non-empty, you know that. 4z plus is non-empty. Starts with minus 8, minus 4, 0, 4, 8, etc. But is it a subgroup of 3z plus? Actually, it fails in the very first case. It's not even a subset. 4z plus is not a subset of 3z plus. It's not properly contained. 4 is absent in 3z plus, 8 is absent in 4z plus, 0 is present, that's okay, but it's not perfectly contained, so it's not a subset. If it's not a subgroup, if it's not a subset, it cannot be a subgroup of 3z plus. It cannot be a subgroup of 3z plus. Okay. Now with that set of revision problems, we have given you like enough recap of what we discussed in the previous classes. We have discussed groups, we have discussed subgroups, abelian groups, cyclic groups, the Lagrange's theorem, properties on subgroups, properties on some of them becoming cosets, and properties on when does a subgroup become a normal subgroup. We have seen all of them. We'll move to the next topic. If you can remember, I promised you yesterday that I will give you an example of one more finite group that is non-abelian. I gave you the group of quaternions. It had 8 elements. I can also give you another example of a group that is non-abelian, and that group is what we learn under the heading as symmetry group, which is also known by some authors as the permutation group, symmetry group or permutation groups. The word permutation is introduced to make it easy to understand the concept. What are we seeing here? A set of all permutations on 3 elements. So if I give you 3 elements A, B, C, you can only rearrange them in 6 possible ways. only in 6 possible ways. Similarly, S3 denotes the set of all arrangements made on a set containing A, B and C. There are 6 possible arrangements. I have listed them down. 6 possible arrangements in which nothing is changed. 1, 2, 3 is 1, 2, 3. I have not changed anything. Second, 1, 2, 3 becomes 1, 3, 2. The image of 1 doesn't change, but 2 and 3 swap places. The last one, 1 and 2 swap swap places, but the last element is unchanged. And no element is left as it is. 1, 2, 3 becomes 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3 becomes 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3 becomes 3, 2, 1. The second element is unchanged. The first and the last are swapped. So this is the set of all rearrangements of 3 letters. You know that 3P3 is 6. If I were to arrange 3 books in 3 places, I can do it only in 3 factorial ways, which is 6. We have listed down all 6 elements which can be part of the given symmetric group. But that's not where we stop. We have defined only the set. We have given you a non-empty set, that's okay. But we have not defined the binary operation involved. You see, we have discussed only the step. To discuss the binary operation, I draw your attention to this next graphic on symmetric groups. So this is how 2 elements operate on each other in this group called symmetric group. So from the previous graphic, I've retained the definitions for A and B. A is 1, 2, 3, where the element 1 is unchanged, 2 and 3 are rearranged as 3 and 2. And B is the permutation in which 1 and 2 are interchanged, 3 remains unchanged. Now this graphic actually tells you of one conventional method to find the product of A star B. So A star B, you write A and B side by side. A is 1, 3, 2. B is 2 and 3, you have written them side by side. Now to find the answer, we will first write the first row as it is. There's nothing to disturb with the first row, because the first row only indicates how it is rearranged. So for any element which is a permutation thing, the first row is always 1, 2, 3, 4 up to whatever number. It's the second row which actually tells you how the shuffling or how the rearranging or how the permutation has been made. If you look at this, this is how the operation works. You follow the image. It says 1 goes to 1. Now go to the 1 of the second element. There 1 goes to 2. So 1 goes to 1, which goes to 2. Therefore the image of 1 is 2. That's why I highlighted them in 3 different colors. Look at the second element. 2 goes to 3, and actually 3 also goes to 3. So therefore 2 goes to 3, which goes to 3 again. The last part, 3 goes to 2, but 2 goes to 1. That's highlighted in the green arrow. 3 goes to 2 and 2 goes to 1. We have 3 going to 1. This is the permutation that we have actually denoted by the element C. So 2, 3, 1 is the element C. This is from the left. Like there are other conventions also which some textbooks may also multiply from the right. So they will follow the images from the right. 1 to 2, 2 to 3, they will write 3 here. 2 to 1, 1 to 1, they will write a 1 here. 3 to 3 and 3 to 2, they will write a 2 here. That's okay. We will uniformly follow one convention where we operate one permutation by the other from the left. So A star B, A operates on B, is that what we see. Now what happens if B star A is happening? B star A, I write down B is 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 3. I write down A 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2. Now let's try and follow the images. If we try and follow the images, you will see 1 goes to 2, but 2 goes to 3. Therefore, if you follow the images in red, 1 goes to 3. If you follow the arrow marks in red, you will see that 1 goes to 3. And 2 goes to 1 and 1 goes to 1 again. So 2 goes to 1. If you follow the green arrows, you will see the answer. And 3 goes to 3, but 3 goes to 2. Therefore, 3 goes to 2. So 1, 2, 3 is mapped to 3, 1, 2. Remember, we are supposed to follow the arrow mark. 1 to 2, 2 to 3. 2 to 1, 1 to 1. 3 to 3 and 3 to 2. So you follow the images, you have your permutation ready. But the most important observation that you can do here is that the operation is not commutative. So we found out A star B, that turned out to be C. We found out B star A, that turned out to be D. Both are totally different. They are not one and the same. And hence we make the first observation about symmetry groups. A symmetry group is not abelian because the operation is not commutative. So I've given you only 2 examples so far of groups that are non-abelian. One is a set of all non-singular matrices of order 2. And the operation connected with is the matrix multiplication. And number 2, which we saw yesterday, is the set of all quaternions, 8 elements, plus 1 minus 1, plus I minus I, plus j minus j, plus k minus k, where the star operation is defined in a very peculiar manner. Even there we found out that the group is not abelian. The last example that we'll discuss throughout this course is the group on permutations of specific elements. It may be S3 where I shuffle 3 numbers, or S5 where I shuffle 5 numbers, or S10 when I shuffle 10 numbers. So when you do this permutation thing, you know that 3p3 is 3 factorial. Therefore S3 will have only 6 elements because 3 factorial is 6. Suppose you were to write down S10, S10 will have 10 factorial elements. That's too large to write down. Or S6 will have 720. No, S6 will have 1 times, what is 5 factorial? 5 factorial is 120, 6 factorial is 720. S6 will have 720 such rearrangements possible. But relax, we will be discussing only simple problems on these. I will not ask you to list all 720 answers, that's stupid. I will not do that. We will discuss problems connected to these. So we have shown that the operation involved is not commutative. We have shown that the group is not abelian. Now let's proceed. Let's try and find the other answers. I'm just curious to give you some practice on finding the answer. Let's try and find what C star D is. C star D, you will follow the arrow marks. 1 goes 2 and 2 goes to 1. Therefore C star D will have the first row as 1, 2, 3. And 1 goes to 2 and 2 goes to 1, therefore this answer is 1. Therefore this answer is 1. And 2 goes to 3, but 3 goes to 2, so 2 goes to 2. Similarly 3 goes to 1 and 1 goes to 3, therefore 3 goes to 3. So what is happening? I multiply C and D and I get the arrangement as it is. If you can recall, this is what we called as the identity element of the group. We will get to the group shortly, but this is what we called as the identity element. So what you get as a result of operating C on D is actually the identity element. But what happens if we swap the order? What if I write D first, 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, and C next, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1. What happens this time? Is it also E? Because if it is also E, we have a nice property. Now let's check it out. 1 goes to 3, 3 goes to 1. So 1 goes to 1. 2 goes to 1, 1 goes to 2. So 2 goes to 2. And 3 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3. So this is 3. So here again I get the identity element back. So C star D and D star C are the same element. That still doesn't mean the group is abelian, because we saw an example where A star B and B star A are totally different. Here they happen to be the E, but that doesn't mean that this is an abelian group. C star D and D star C are together equivalent to the identity element, and hence you can conclude that C and D are inverse elements of each other. They are inverse elements of each other. You multiply one with other, you get the identity element. So they are inverse elements of each other. Now let's also have a look at the other three elements. Let's see what they are. Let's try and find out what F star F is. F star F is 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, star again 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Now when I multiply both 1 to 3, 3 to 1, so I get back 1, 2 to 2, 2 to 2, so I get back 2 again, 3 to 1 and 1 to 3, I get back 3 again. Surprisingly, you see that F star F is E. What does it mean? It simply means F is its own inverse. F is its own inverse. F is its own inverse. And the same is true for A. You will be able to verify that A star A is E and B star B is also E. Or B is its own inverse, A is its own inverse, F is its own inverse, obviously E is its own inverse. The only two elements which are not inverses of each other are C and D. So C star D is going to be E, D star C is going to be E. So C is D's inverse, D is C's inverse. That's how this group is constructed. Yes, and this is the Cayley's table for the group. I'll leave it to you as an exercise because this involves computation of at least 25 elements. So if you identify E as your identity element, A, B, C, D and F as per the definition I showed to you on a previous slide, you can complete this Cayley's table involving 36 entries, 6 rows and 6 columns. This you don't have to do it because that's the identity element. So the first row and first column are easy, and we have already checked A star A is E, B star B is E, F star F is E, C and D are inverses of each other. You don't have to check these. So a 6 here and a 5 here, 11 and 5 more, 16 entries you don't have to check. The remaining 20 entries though, I'll leave it to you as an exercise. You can check and find out that this is how it happens. When I operate B and D I get F. When I operate D and B I get F again. When I operate C and D I get F. When I operate A and C I get B. There are two different answers and you can check this for every entry. You can verify this will be right. This is the Cayley's table of the group on the rearrangements of the 3 letters, 1 or 3 numbers 1, 2 and 3. Let's have a look at a few more examples to help you get familiarized with this idea on multiplying 2 permutations. On your screens is 2 elements from the group S5. Now what does S5 talk about? Set of all rearrangements of 5 numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now remember S5 will have 5 factorial elements. Just like S3 had 3 factorial elements, S5 will have 5 factorial elements. It will have 120 elements. We are not going to do all of them. I am going to pick and solve a few simple problems. I have picked 2 numbers here, 2 permutations. One in which 1 is mapped to 5, 2 is mapped to 3, 3 is mapped to 4, 4 is mapped to 1, 5 is mapped to 2, and the other one in which the mappings are like this. This is how we have rearranged. Now I want you to find out what happens if I operate this entry, let's call it A, and this element as B, when I operate A on B from the left. Let's get this practice done. We will follow the images to help you identify it easily. 1 goes to 5 and 5 goes to 4. Therefore, when I write the answer for 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, when I write the answer for 1, it must be 4. Similarly, 2 goes to 3 but 3 goes to 3. So 2 should be mapped to 3. Follow this very carefully. I am following the images from the left of your screen. 3 goes to 4, 4 goes to 5, so 3 goes to 5. 4 goes to 1 and 1 goes to 2, so 4 goes to 2. The last part, 5 goes to 2 and 2 goes to 1, so 5 goes to 1. So this is the result of operating A on B from the left. We will get one more rearrangement of the 5 numbers where 1 is mapped to 4, 2 is mapped to 3, 3 to 5, 4 to 2 and 5 to 1. Let's try one more exercise. This time I am considering S6, where S6 is the set of all rearrangements of 6 letters, 6 characters or 6 numbers. It's going to have 720 elements. We'll not do all of them, we'll just pick a couple of elements which are simple enough. So A and B will operate A from A to B from the left. Let's see, let's just follow the images. 1 goes to 5, 5 goes to 4, so 1 goes to 4. 2 to 4 and 4 to 5, so 2 goes to 5. 3 to 6 and 6 to 3, so 3 goes to 3 again. 4 to 1 and 1 to 2, so 4 goes to 2. 5 to 2 and 2 to 1, so 5 goes to 1. The last part, 6 to 3 and 3 to 6, so 6 goes to 6. So this is how you can multiply any two permutations either from the left or from the right. This one is a permutation from S8. Now remember what S8 is. S8 is going to have 8 factorial elements. 8 factorial is 720 times 40,03200. 403200. It's 5040 times 8. 5040 times. You're going to have these many elements. That's 40320 elements. 40,320 elements in it. We have picked 2 elements out of that. Let's see what the answer is going to be. I'll write it down for lack of space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the element is again going to be of this form. One to 5, 5 to 8, so 1 is mapped to 8. 2 to 4, 4 to 5, so 2 is mapped to 5. 3 to 6, 6 to 3, so 3 is mapped to 3 again. 4 to 7, 7 to 4, so 4 is 4 again. 5 to 2, 2 to 1, so 5 is mapped to 1. 6 to 3, 3 to 6, so 6 goes to 6 again. 7 to 1, 1 to 7, so 7 is going to 7 again. 8 to 8 and 8 to 2, so 8 goes to 2. We've got one more arrangement of 8 letters as the result of operating the left one on the right one. Now what if I operate the same element? It's like A star A. Both, this is A again. I'm operating A on A. Let's check what happens then. 1 to 5, 5 to 2, so 1 is going to 2. 2 to 4, 4 to 7, so 2 goes to 7. 3 goes to 6, 6 goes to 3, so 3 is to 3 again. 4 to 7, 7 to 1, so 4 goes to 1 this time. 5 to 2, 2 to 4, so 5 goes to 4. 6 to 3, 3 to 6, so 6 goes to 6. 7 to 1, 1 to 5, so 7 goes to 5. And 8 to 8, 8 is again going to 8, so 8 is going to 8. So when you operate one on the other, you are not getting E, so it's not an inverse of itself. It's supposed to have another inverse. And now this is going to be easy, but we'll once again test how it happens. This element, you know it already, and this element is the identity mapping. This is supposed to be E. So by the property, when I operate any element on the identity, I should get back the element. So we're trying to do this. Let's see, we are going to get A back. Whether that happens or not, we'll just follow. How is it? 1 to 5, 5 to 5, so 1 is 5. 2 to 4, 4 to 4, so 2 is 4 again. 3 to 6, 6 to 6, so 3 to 6. 4 to 7, 7 to 7, so 4 to 7 again. 5 to 2, 2 to 2, so 5 is, oh yes, 5 is not, yeah, 5 to 2 and 2 to 2, so you get back to 6 to 3 and 3 to 3, so 6 goes to 3. 7 to 1, 1 to 1, so 7 goes to 1. 8 is 8 everywhere, so 8 is 8 again. You see that this completely matches with what we had with A. So that justifies, that explains to you what is the speciality behind the identity element. You operate any element with this, you get the element back. And now, what about the inverse? We are interested in finding the inverse of an element A. What can A dash be? Let's say A is this, a permutation on 6 letters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is mapped as 5, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3. What can be this A such that A star A dash is actually E? So if the operation were addition or multiplication, you know how to find the inverse. It was very easy. But this operation on the group of permutations is not as simple as addition or multiplication. So we have to be a little careful while we are doing these operations. And you don't know what these numbers are. These numbers x, y, z, alpha, beta, gamma can be anything. It's from the set of 1 to 6, but it can be anything, but you don't know what they are. And since this is a permutation on 6 elements, you will have 720 combinations to choose from. So you cannot just guess, but I will show you a small trick or a small procedure to find the inverse. I will show how it works. I say the inverse is 4, 5, 6, 2, 1, 3 because I claim that the inverse is actually 4, 5, 6, 2, 1, 3. That's what I claim. I have written that as the answer at the bottom. And I'll show you why it is right first, and then I'll show you how I'm doing it. So 1 goes to 5 and 5 goes to 1, so 1 goes to 1. 2 goes to 4, but 4 goes to 2, so 2 goes to 2 again. 3 to 6, 6 to 3, so 3 to 3. 4 to 1, 1 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 1 to 4, so 4 to 4. 5 to 2, 2 to 5, so 5 to 5. 6 to 3 and 3 to 6, so 6 to 6. So if this is my A dash, it perfectly meets the conditions that are defined for an inverse of an element. But how did I get it? I am not guessing it blindly. There is a small trick that you can use to identify this inverse element, and that's what I am going to explain next. The strategy is to repeat whatever you had on the top. So A had 5, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3 at the bottom. I will repeat it at the top, and I will write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as needed. Now I will just arrange it in the ascending order. So 1 to 4 comes first, 2 to 5 comes next, 3 to 6 follows, 4 to 2 is what you have after, 5 to 1 is next, and 6 to 3 is last. That simple trick will help us identify the inverse element. So the trick is very simple. You write whatever the element in the reverse, you flip the order. Here I had 5, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3 at the bottom row, right at the top row, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 was at the top row, right at the bottom row. And now just rearrange the columns like in the general form, in the format that you have already wished for. So 1 is first, 2 is next, 3 is next, 4, 5 and 6. That will give you the inverse of any permutation. It sounds unbelievable, but this trick works every single time. The trick works every single time. I will show you an example. It works. I have just given you an example showing that 4, 5, 6, 2, 1, 3 will actually give me E again. So if this is A, this is the A dash I got you. So A star A dash is giving me E, and it is also giving me E if I flip the order. If this is A dash and this is A dash star A is still E. So you don't have to just blindly believe me. You can see for yourself that this is the inverse of this, and this is the proof for that. So the trick, the small trick that I suggested actually seems to work, but it doesn't work only for this problem. It also works for every other problem. And I have given you an example. Now let's try and find the inverse of this element. It's a permutation on 8 numbers, so you're supposed to have 40,320 numbers to choose from, but you're not going to take a blind guess or choose from a bag. We will find the answer as per the trick I've told you. What was the trick? The trick was to flip the given order. So I'll write 7, 1, 6, 5, 8, 3, 4, 2. And at the bottom I'll write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now for the inverse, if you call it as B, I'll write B dash easily now by just rearranging the columns here. The strategy is to rearrange the columns. And what strategy you use? How do you rearrange? Rearrange the columns. Arrange them in the order that you prefer. You prefer the 1, 2, 3, 4 order. So do it as it is. So 1 to 2 comes first, 2 to 8 comes next, 3 to 6 follows, 4 to 7 is after, 5 to 4 is next, 6 to 3 is next, 7 to 1 is next, 8 to 5 is the last. Now I claim that this B dash is the inverse of B. I claim that this will work. And how do I show you, or how do I make you believe? Let's do the computation. Let's do what B star B dash is. Let's follow the images once again and write down the result of the answer B star B dash. How does B star B dash work? 1 to 7, and look at 7, 7 goes to 1, so 1 goes to 1. 2 to 1 and 1 goes to 2, so 2 goes to 2. 3 to 6 and 6 goes to 3, so 3 to 3 again. 4 to 5 and 5 goes to 4, so 4 is to 4. 5 to 8 and 8 goes to 5, so 8, 5, 5. 6 to 3 and 3 to 6, so 6 and 6. 7 and 4 and 4 and 7, so 7 and 7. The last part 8 to 2 and 2 to 8, so 8 and 8 again. So you did operate B on B dash and you got back E. So your trick worked, you have found the inverse. That's all. You can find the inverse of any permutation by using this trick. Remember, only 2 steps. Step number 1, flip the rows of the given permutation. And step number 2, rearrange the columns in the order that is always preferred. That's your inverse. Now I'll leave it as an exercise to you to check if B dash star B is also E. That's a simple exercise, and you can believe me, it will always work. You can operate this on this and you'll still get back this as the answer. You will still get back this E as the answer. That will always work. I'll leave it to you as an exercise. We'll try a different question now. Let's see, I want you to solve it along with me. I'll solve and so will you. We'll do it together. Step 1 is to flip them. So flipping them means I'll write 5, 4, 6, 7, 2, 3, 1, 8. And step number 2, I'll just write the top row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now out of this, let's call this element as A, and let's write down A dash. A dash just wants you to arrange the columns in the preferred order. So 1, 7 is where you start, 2, 5, 3, 6, 4, 2, 5, 1, 6, 3, 7, 4 and 8, 8. Now let's multiply A and A dash. We'll see if you have done it correctly. 1 to 5, 5 to 1, so 1 is 1. 2 to 4, 4 to 2, so 2 is 2. 3 to 6, 6 to 3, so 3 is 3 again. 4 to 7, 7 to 4, so 4 is 4 again. 5 to 2, 2 to 5, so 5 is 5. 6 to 3, 3 to 6, so 6 is 6. 7 to 1, 1 to 7, so 7 is 7. 8 is unchanged in both answers, so 8 is 8. So you once again got back the identity element. So this is how you find the inverse. It's not as easy as you find the inverses when you're adding or multiplying or doing a modulo addition. It's kind of different, and you will just use this trick, the 2-step trick. Flip the rows, rearrange the columns. That's enough to find the inverse element. Now this time around I want you to try something different. To sum up this set of exercise problems, let's call this A, let's call this B. I want to find what is the inverse of A star B. I want you to find A star B first, and then find the inverse of it. Finding A star B is not very difficult, you actually done it some time back, but I want you to find the inverse of A star B. Now the inverse can be found in two different methods, we will do both. So A star B, we will first write what is A star, we will first write A star B first, that is easy. A star B is just going to be once again following of images 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now let us write down the answer we are looking for. How do you do A star B? You follow the images from the left. So 1 to 5, 5 to 8, so 1 goes to 8, 2 to 4, 4 to 5, so 2 is 5 again, 3 to 6, 6 to 3, so 3 is 3 again, 4 to 7, 7 to 4, so 4 is 4, 5 to 2, 2 to 1, so 5 is 1, 6 to 3 and 3 to 6, 6 is 6, 7 to 1 and 1 is 7, so 7 goes to 7, 8 goes to 2 and 2 goes to 8 goes to 8 and 8 goes to 2. So that is your A star B. Now I want the inverse of A star B. What is the inverse of A star B? This is pretty easy, just like how we did the previous problem. You will flip the rows and rearrange the columns. Let us first flip the rows. I will write 8, 5, 3, 4, 1, 6, 7, 2. I will write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That will give me the enough time to write down the inverse. So what will the inverse be? A star B dash will be rearranging of the columns now. So 1, 5, 2, 8, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 2, 6, 6, 7, 7 and 8, 1. Now that is your A star B dash, A star B the whole inverse. But this you have done by actually first finding A star B and then using the trick I told you to find the inverse. Let us see if you have done it actually correctly. Let us do it by the formula. If you recall, I told you some time back that the inverse of A star B is actually B dash star A dash. We discussed this at the start of the class. We will use that formula here to verify if the previous answer we got is actually right. For that we need both B dash and A dash. Let us write B dash. B dash is actually what we wrote some time back. Let us write that down. B dash is what we found here. B dash is this. B dash is 24867 286 74315. 286 74315. That is B dash. We just did it some time back, so I am not doing it again. We also had A dash some time back. What was A dash? A dash, we had A dash somewhere here. Yeah, A dash is 756 21348. 756 21348. Yeah, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. All right. That is your B dash and that is your array. We will just do a small check to see. 1 to 5, 5 to 1, 2 to 4, 4 to 2, 3 to 6, 6 to 3, 4 to 7, 7 to 4, 5 to 2, 2 to 5, 6 to 3, 3 to 6, 7 to 1, 1 to 7, 8 is everywhere. Alright. Now here 1 to 7, 7 to 1, 2 to 1, 1 to 2, 3 to 6, 6 to 3, 4 to 5, 5 to 4, 5 to 8, 8 to 5, 6 to 3, 3 to 6, 7 to 4, 4 to 7, 8 to 2, 2 to 8. So we have B dash correctly, we have A dash correctly. Let us try and find what is B dash star A dash. Remember, we are operating from the left and we are following the images. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and now let us check the answers. 1 to 2, 2 to 5, 2 to 8, 8 to 8, 3 to 6, 6 to 3, 4 to 7 and 7 to 4, 5 to 4 and 4 to 2, 6 to 3 and 3 to 6, 7 to 1 and 1 to 7, 8 to 5 and 5 to 1. So this is the answer we got after multiplying B dash on A dash from the left. In the previous slide we got the answer by applying the trick. We found A star B first and then we found the inverse of A star B, and you can see that the answers are 100% match. A 5, 8, 3, 4, 2, 6, 7, 1. Again a 5, 8, 3, 4, 2, 6, 7, 1. We have done both calculations perfectly correctly. So that's how you find the inverse of any element. There are two ways to find the inverse of A star B, and you've done both. That gives you enough practice on that. Now to wind up today's class, we will discuss one more set of problems on permutations. We have A, we have B, we have C. Let's find these 7 answers and then go to the next topic. What is A star B? Let's write down what is A star B. There will be one last set of problems on permutations. A star B. A star B is, once again we will just follow the images to get the answers. A star B is 1 to 2 and 2 to 2, 2 to 3 and 3 to 3, 3 to 1 and 1 to 1, 4 to 4 to 5, 5 to 5 to 4. This is going to be A star B. We'll go to the next one. B star A. B star A need not be the same. Let's check it out anyway. B star B. B is here, A is here. So we'll follow this. 1 to 1 to 2, 2 to 2 to 3, 3 to 3 to 1, 4 to 5 to 5, 5 to 4 to 4. That's going to be your B star A. What is A star A? Let's just square up A with A again. A is this. A is again this. Let's multiply both. 1 to 2 to 3, 2 to 3 to 1, 3 to 1 to 2, 4 to 4 to 4, 5 to 5 to 5. So that is your answer for A star A. Let's try the next one. C star B. Let's write down C. C is here and B is here. C star B, we will once again follow the images carefully. Remember, we will operate from the left. So C comes first, followed by B. We will follow the images of C. So 1 to 5 to 4. So 1 goes to 4. 2 to 4 to 5. 2 goes to 5. 3 to 3 to 3. 3 is unchanged. 4 to 1 to 1. 4 is still 1. 5 to 2 to 2. 5 is 2. That's your C star B. What's the inverse of B? Inverse of B. Inverse of B is always interesting. Let's try and find the inverse. We'll just flip the rows first. You'll have 1, 2, 3, 5, 4. That's the bottom row. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the top row. Now this just has to be arranged column wise. So B dash is given by 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5 and 5, 4. In fact, B happens to be its own inverse. I guess that's correct. B happens to be its own inverse. So 1 to 1 gives you 1 back. 4 to 5, but 5 goes to 4. So 4 will come back to 4. 5 goes to 4 and 4 goes to 5. That's your B dash. That's your B dash. Let's find the inverse of C. This is going to be interesting. Inverse of C is going to be 5, 4, 3, 1, 2 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You will just rearrange the columns now. Therefore, C dash is going to be 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 3, 4, 2 and 5, 1. Let's check if that's right. C star C dash 1 to 5 to 1, 2 to 4 to 2, 3 everywhere, 4 to 1 to 4, 5 to 2 to 5. That's right. That's how you find C dash. To complete the problem, let's just find out what happens when you do A star B star C. We already had A star B with us. We'll write this as A star B star C. We had A star B before. What is A star B? 2, 3, 1, 5, 4. Let's write it down. 2, 3, 1, 5, 4. That is 2, 3, 1, 5, 4 operating on C. What was C? C is 5, 4, 3, 1, 2. It's from the left. So we'll not have to mess up with the orders. So we'll have 1 to 2 to 4. So 1 is 4. 2 to 3 to 3. So 2 is 3. 3 to 1 to 5, so 3 is 5, 4 to 5 to 2, so 4 is 2, the last 5 to 4 to 1, so 5 is 1. 5 is 1. So this is supposed to be A star B star C. So with that practice, we'll wind up the set of all problems on permutation groups, and we'll just have a look at one last concept. We'll try and identify what subgroups of S3 are normal. Now if you look at the 6 elements that are present in S3, you will find that it has 4 non-trivial subgroups. I already told you any group will have 2 trivial subgroups, the entire group and the group involving only the identity element. Now apart from these two, S3 happens to have 4 other subgroups. One is H1. H1 is, I'll pair up A and E again, only A and E. You can check what A is. A, if you can just proceed further. I already gave you what these 6 elements are. These are A, B, C, D, E and F. So if you can check, you can always find out what the answers are. Okay. So when I take only 2 elements A and D, it also happens that they form a subgroup. The set is closed. The order, the elements you operate on them, the operation that you have done so far, this result stays within the set. So it is actually closed, and A is its own inverse because A star A is E. E is also its own inverse, so it is closed, it's a subset, and every element has its own inverse, therefore H1 is a subgroup. A similar case can be found with H2, which is E and B only, and H3 which is E and F only. But H4 is also a subgroup where I pick C, D and E. C and D are inverses of each other. E is its own inverse, the set is closed. Therefore we have 4 subgroups of S3, and our discussion towards the end of this class is to find out which of them are normal subgroups. Yesterday we learned that a subgroup is a normal subgroup if the left coset and the right coset are identical. So we have 4 subgroups. Let's try and find out which of them are also normal subgroups. The first one we'll pick up is H1 as E comma A. Now when I select some random element B from the group and I operate B on H1 from the left, I get B star E and B star A. B star E happens to be B and B star A happens to be D. That's a left coset. Now when I do the same operation from the right, I have E star B which is B, but A star B is C, it's the right coset. The left coset and the right coset are not identical, and therefore this is not a normal subgroup. It's not a normal subgroup. What we have is not a normal subgroup. Similarly, when you pick the second subgroup H2 containing E and B alone and pick some random element from the group, A star H2 gives you this answer, H2 star A gives you this answer. Both answers are totally different, and therefore they have elements in common, but they are not identical. They are not identical, and therefore H2 also is not a normal subgroup. Proceeding, what happens with H3? H3 has E and F. Only the identity element E and one more element F. Let's pick A. A star E and A star F is A comma D. E star A and F star A is A comma C. Once again, the 2 cosets are not identical. This is also not a normal subgroup. Don't lose heart. The last example that we see is the subgroup H4 containing E, C and D, and it happens so that this actually forms a subgroup. Let's pick B star H4. Operating B on H4 from the left we have B F A, and operating B on H4 from the right we have B A F. Both the left and right cosets this time are 100% match. They are completely identical. Therefore this subgroup is a normal subgroup, and it's not only for B. You can select any random element. I leave it to you as an exercise. Select A, select F, select C, select D. You do this operation, the left coset and the right coset will be completely identical, and as a result you will see that H4 is the only normal subgroup of S3. So I I've delivered the promise I gave you yesterday. I've shown you one more group which is non-abelian but also has a subgroup that is normal. So with that, we'll wrap up today's lesson on symmetric groups. Today we have learned, we have solved a couple of problems first. We did a recap of all that we learned in the previous classes. I introduced the notion of a symmetric group. We learned how the group operates. We also looked at the table which gave us the entire Cayley's table of S3, and we have solved close to 10 problems on operating two permutations, squaring a permutation, finding the inverse of a permutation, finding the inverse of A star B in two different ways, and we have also established one normal subgroup of this symmetric group. With that, we will wind up today's lecture. In the next lesson, the last one for this unit, we will focus on homomorphisms on groups. We will take it up in the next lesson. Thank you.